Welcome to the Retire with Peace podcast, the podcast where we help you create a fulfilling and stress-free retirement. Each week, we bring you expert advice, practical tips, and inspiring stories to help you plan and live your best retirement life. Whether you're nearing retirement or already enjoying your golden years, this podcast is here to support you every step of the way. Let's embark on this journey together and discover how to retire with peace.
Welcome back to the Retire with Peace podcast. As always, I'm your host, Dave Zaegel. Today, let's get a little nerdy. We want to talk about Monte Carlo analysis and also retirement guardrails. I know we talk about these topics a decent amount, especially the guardrails, and we've touched on Monte Carlo analysis before. But I think there's a group of people that like to dive a little bit more into the details on these things. And I'm also trying really hard to shift people off of the Monte Carlo analysis way of thinking in retirement planning. And I'll explain why. But let's back up first to talk a little bit about what Monte Carlo analysis is. Well, Monte Carlo analysis is typically what you will see when you put something into a retirement planning software and it says, here is your probability of success. And what a Monte Carlo analysis does is it runs through 1,000 plus simulations based upon your inputs, different rates of return, so it'll vary the rates of return so that because there's a sequence of return risk in retirement planning. So it can go through a lot of different scenarios and say, with the information that we have and with what you've put in with your assets and what you need for income in retirement, all those things, it can give you, here is your probability of success. That is essentially, in a very short version, what Monte Carlo analysis does. And it's not necessarily that Monte Carlo analysis is incorrect. In fact, in a lot of other contexts, it's actually really necessary to be able to calculate statistical probabilities. If you're an engineer and you need a bridge not to fail, you need to be able to run 1,000 simulations of a bridge having 0% probability of failure. That's important. When we talk about retirement planning, however, that percentage of likelihood of success isn't really a goal. I'll illustrate with this with a couple of questions. Just answer these in your head, or if you're sitting next to somebody, you can discuss. But I want you to think about this. If you're looking at a probability of success for your retirement, what percentage would make you happy and comfortable? And then second question is, what percentage would have you scared? I bet that if I asked 10 different people, I'd get a whole bunch of different answers. Some might say, well, I'd feel safe if it were at 90%, but I'd get really scared if we got down to 75%. The follow-on question to both of those is why? Why those percentages? And almost 100% of the time, the answer is those just kind of feel right. That's not a wrong answer. That's a very normal human answer. Whatever percentages you decide, most of the time it's because you say, those just feel right. Now, somebody who's really statistically inclined might give an answer like 95%, and you ask them why, and they'll reference 2 standard deviations. Good for you. That's great. I love it. But most people have no idea what I just said. So when we talk about what percentages make you feel comfortable versus feeling scared, it is a lot of times based on feeling. Let's take the extreme example. Somebody might say 100%. I need to have 100% probability of success. And that's fine. It's not ideal, and I'll explain why in a second, but it's fine. Let's back up on this 100% and talk about the 4% rule. If you haven't heard about it, you can look this up pretty quickly. It's been around for decades. The idea is that it was determined that if you just draw out 4% of your investment balance each year and live on that alone, plus Social Security, that's fine. But if you're only drawing out 4% of your investment balance, you have 100% probability or virtually 100% probability of not running out of money. And mathematically, that is true. Just given historical rates of return, everything we've ever seen in the markets, that is solid. 100%. If you're not going to run out of money, if you're only withdrawing 4% of your investment account balance. Heck, these days you can go to the bank and get some CDs that'll get you close to 4%. So while mathematically true, that's not ideal. And in fact, the very creator of the 4% rule not too long ago came out and said, hey guys, wait a second. This was not intended to be what you do. It was intended to be mathematically correct, which it is. But the creator himself said, hey, this is way too conservative. You do not need to be this conservative. You can be taking out more. That's the point. We're not aiming for 100% probability of success, because 100% probability of success is also 100% probability of you underspending what you could. I want to clarify one thing on this, which is that we are not advocating for consumerism. So somebody might be very well off for whatever reason. They might say, I have $5 million of assets, but I only spend $9,000 a month. There's no way you're going to run out of money. If you're only spending $9,000 a month and you have $5 million, I challenge you to find a way where you're going to run out of money that is not involving some complete economic, social catastrophe. That's what it's going to take to run out of money in that type of scenario. So if somebody had $5 million, even with the 4% rule, this is crazy. Even with the 4% rule. So if you take $5 million and you say, what's 1% of $5 million? It's $50,000. Multiply that by 4, you have $200,000 per year that you could be taking out of this $5 million bucket. Well, if you're spending $9,000 a month, you ain't taking out even $200,000. So you're not even up to the 4% withdrawal. So in this scenario, the point of all this that I'm making is that in this scenario, the point is that not that we say, well, gee, I just need to be taking out 300,000 and spending it on whatever. That's not really the point. The point is, how can we be intentional about using this balance that we've built up? We do not want to forego experiences, for example, because we're worried about money, because we're worried about trying to hit this 100% area of confidence. So if there's something that we want to do, maybe there's a trip we want to take, or somebody that we want to donate to, do it. If the plan allows you to do it, do it. Don't be so stuck on this needing 100% probability or this 4% rule. What you're going to wind up with is a pile of money at the end, and probably looking back saying, crap, I could have donated to this, or I could have taken my wife or my family or any group of people to this place, or whatever this means to you. Again, the point is not to say, gee, we just have to spend on crap just because the plan says we're allowed to. The point is to have this mentality of, if in our example, you have $5 million, but you only spend $9,000 a month, there's a big gap there. Doesn't mean you have to spend that gap, but you have to be able to mentally say, okay, well, is there something I could be using for that? Is there something that I can invest in, either in happiness and experiences or donations to causes that need the money? Anything is fine. But we need to shift out of that mentality of, I must have 100% certainty. And really, I'm trying to get people to shift out of these Monte Carlo percentages, because it's not really a plan per se. There's no exact percentage at which everything works out great. Because if you have too high of a percentage of probability of success, you also have that high of a percentage of really underspending what you could be possibly doing. If we look at this statistically, to get back to the more nerdy world, if you look at it statistically in terms of outcomes, any type of retirement planning is going to look like a bell curve where the 100% certainty is really low, 0% certainty is really low, and then there's a big bell curve in the middle, which the middle was going to be 50% likelihood of success. 50% likelihood that you achieve everything, you spend exactly what you have, and then at the end you'll wind up with zero because you spent everything. Nobody I know really wants to aim for that because that's a little bit risky at 50%. Nobody wants their retirement to be a coin flip, even though that's the most likely outcome in a range of outcomes. So where can we fall in that? And this is really where we try to shift from Monte Carlo analysis of percentages, and we flip it a little. I shouldn't say flip it, but we change the idea to be a guardrails analysis, because the guardrails analysis allows us to have a range and to make adjustments within that range. So we look at it and we say, this is a relatively safe area of spending. And we have guardrails on either end, where if the balance goes up, we can increase how much we have available. If balance goes down, maybe we need to decrease. But these aren't big adjustments. You'd be amazed, absolutely amazed, when you look at this analysis of what these adjustments are. For example, let's stick with our $9,000 a month person that we had earlier. Let's say that the guardrails analysis shows if we can do $9,000 per month, we can be very confident that we are not going to run out of money with that, as long as we are willing to make adjustments along the way if the balance declines substantially. Now, when people hear adjustments, they're like, oh, what's this? Is this 9,000 going to go to 6? And then that's going to stink. Usually not. No, we're talking about maybe the 9,000 temporarily goes to 8,400. And I'm making this up on the fly, but we've seen similar examples like this, where if the market, let's say the market drops and my investments go down 30%, which would be a substantial drop, especially if you've structured investments properly, that'd be a gigantic drop for retirement planning. Let's say it does that, and we have to cut our spending from 9,000 to 8,400 a month temporarily until the market comes back. Well, most people we show that to, they say, that's it? That's my adjustment? I have to go from 9 to 8,400? Like, none of this is fun. We've seen the market drop. Now we have to adjust income down from 9,000 to 8,400. That's not fun. But I think most people would look at that and say, that's really all? That's the only adjustment that I need to make, is just taking that down $600 a month, and our retirement is still fine? The answer is yes. It really is. I'm not making this up. The answer really is yes. If we can set proper incomes and proper guardrails, you don't need massive adjustments if the stock market goes against you temporarily. And this has been tested against 2008 and 2009, against the dot-com crash, against 1970s inflation. It's been tested against Great Depression. And we can show those tests. And we can show that if you have these guardrails, you're just fine. And these guardrails will allow you to spend more while still having success in retirement, as long as you're willing to potentially make those adjustments along the way. This is the shift that I'm really trying hard to get people to. So that way, they're not as worried. I feel like these percentages and these Monte Carlos really get people worried, because they'll have a percentage in their mind that they feel comfortable with. And if it gets below that, they start worrying. They'll start pulling back on spending. They'll make just different decisions, which they don't have to do. If you're really wanting to see a percentage at 90% and it drops to 86 or 82, a lot of people will get really worried. They'll say, how do I get back to 90? That's my percentage. Why did it drop to 82? That's not good. By the way, 82 is amazing, first of all. So let's not, and I think that's part of the problem is these are really, really good percentages and people don't realize how good they are. 82 is amazing. It just might mean, like these guardrails show, that you might need to make some adjustments potentially along the way, which are not huge adjustments. But it's hard to see that when you're just looking at percentages because it's all based on feeling. In fact, a lot of these softwares, there's one that I use that can do a Monte Carlo analysis, and they've color coded this. And 80% or above is green. I think maybe 65 to 80 is yellow, and 65% or below is red. I don't know who came up with that. What? I guess there's no mathematical reason behind that at all. Zero. Just some people decided that was going to be the color coding for those percentages. And I'm not trying to knock this software because we have to understand that this was put in place decades ago. And it's not a bad tool. It's the best, maybe not the best. It was a good tool for what they had at the time. Challenge is it's become the predominant tool, and it's an easy thing to show, especially if it's just an online calculator or something like that. They can just show probability of success, and there you go. It's just not that helpful. You actually don't need to have that high of a probability of success if you know how to adjust along the way. It's a little bit like going on a hike. If you have somebody that can guide you along the hike, as things come up, you're fine. They know the trail, they've seen this before, even if it's something they haven't seen before, they know how they can adjust. You don't need to go in and go, what's 100% probability that we make it from point A to point B? It's like, no, we have a guide. We're good. This person knows how to get us there. Stuff might happen. It might start raining. Maybe we get off track. Maybe a bear shows up. Who knows? But this person knows what the heck to do. And we can adjust. Retirement's no different. You're getting from point A to point B. You need to have a good plan to do that. You can't go wildly overspending. No percentage or plan in the world is going to work if you're just wildly overspending. But if you understand what spending is allowed, and you can put some guardrails in place and make some little adjustments along the way, you'll be amazed at, one, how much you can actually spend. And when I say, again, spend, that could be used for anything, used for charitable donations, used for one-time experiences, all that stuff. All fine. You'd be amazed how much you can actually spend. We see this a lot, actually. One more side note. I was working with somebody recently, about a year ago, and they were talking with us about their retirement planning. They're figuring out who they wanted to go with. They were talking with us and with two other people. And all three of us put together plans. And this person came back to our office and said, I don't understand. I talked to these other two people. Their plans were pretty similar. Your plan's telling me I can spend a lot more. What's the deal? And we had to have this discussion around the planning software that's being used is just way too conservative. And that is most planning software. Because there's not any built-in adjustment period. They're not really taking tax planning into a place. There's a lot that can go on to where retirement can be an okay plan and it will work. And it actually will work because it's more conservative. But there's a lot that you could be missing out on if we're not taking things like this into consideration, like tax planning, variable income, things like that. So it's just important to note that you can actually get more out. You can do more than you think you can. You don't need the 100% Monte Carlo. You don't even really need the 90% Monte Carlo. People like to see that because it's a feeling, but I'm trying to get people off that. A lot of people that we've seen, and we've talked with other advisors as well, who've seen the same thing, talk about how when people first retire, they're really, really afraid of spending money. And that is completely understandable because you're going from spent decades earning money. Now, all of a sudden, I'm turning that faucet off and I only have this much available, and I don't want to overspend it. So most people we've seen, and a lot of other advisors have seen, are worried about spending in that first year, maybe even 2 years. Then when they get further into retirement and see, oh, it's actually working fine, then they start to free up their spending. What we're trying to do is get people to free up a little bit earlier by understanding that having these guardrails in place, they're going to be fine. Don't look so much at what your Monte Carlo percentage of success is. That's not a goal. It is a mathematical answer, but it's not, for those who are really nerdy, it's not a statistically significant answer. It's really more important that we understand what the beginning point is, what the guardrails are, and what adjustments might be needed along the way. If we can get to that point of understanding, provides a lot more peace, a lot less worry about what ifs, because a lot of those what ifs will happen. We talked about that a few episodes ago, where shifting from if a stock market drops happens to shifting towards when a stock market drop happens, because it will happen. If we can shift that understanding from if to when and have these guardrails in place ready to go for what might those adjustments be, it makes retirement planning and actually executing on retirement so much easier. So I hope that helps. This was a longer episode. I wanted to dive in a little bit more into Monte Carlo analysis and in guardrails, compare and contrast the two, and try as best I can to shift people off this percentage of success analysis over to guardrails and planning for adjustments along the way, because it's going to bring you a lot more success, a lot more options, and a lot more peace.